In this video, I'm going to start discussing how we are going to solve quadratics with what is called the square root method. And let's talk about quadratics here. A quadratic equation should first be written in standard form, and that will look like this. This is the generic ax squared plus bx plus c. And it's going to need to be equal to 0 for all of these problems. And it says when b becomes 0, this equation becomes, meaning your middle term. If you don't have a middle term, it would look like this, ax squared plus c, because the middle term is gone. So I'm going to write middle, I'm going to call it bx is missing. So then this is what we're actually going to be looking for. So solving the quadratic equations of this form, what we're going to do is use what is called the square root method. We will not be solving these quadratics if you have a middle term. So notice in all of these, we're going to use the square root method because our middle term will be missing. And so here's what we're going to do. We're going to isolate our ax squared term on one side of the equation. So you're going to move your constant to the other side. And then number 2, we're going to take the square root of each side, and then we're going to solve our two equations. So finding the square roots when your x squared is equal to a number. If the number is positive, meaning greater than 0, so maybe you want to write positive. So x squared is equal to positive. You're going to get two answers. If your x squared is equal to 0, I should have written down two solutions. Here you're going to get one solution. And I'm going to show you examples of all of these. And if your x squared is set equal to a negative, you're going to have no real solutions. Okay, so I'm going to show you about, I think I have 6 examples here. And then I'll do a separate series of videos after that. So for this first example, just kind of talking about solving here, if we have x squared equal to 16, to undo the x squared, we need to apply the square root symbol on both sides. So when you see that, when you apply that symbol, you should also see a plus and minus. And the square root of 16 is 4, and we're going to write plus and minus 4. So we actually have two answers. So notice how this 16 was a positive. We get two solutions because 4 times 4 was equal to 16, and negative 4 times negative 4 is also equal to 16. So that's why we have two answers here. But now square root, if we apply here to 11, our answer just isn't going to be a nice number like 4. It's going to be a decimal, but we will still have two solutions. So I'll show you here with our calculator. So if you're allowed to use decimals, the square root button is, I'm going to have to use the second key and then my square button. You'll see a square root show up, and then put the number 11 in there. So we're going to have positive and negative 3.3, and I'll just do 2 decimal places, so I'll round that 1 up because of the 6 to a 2. So you'll have a 3.32 and a negative 3.32. And that would be your solution here for that one. And then if I apply my square root here to a negative 4, plus and minus the square root of negative 4, I want to show you this. So if I were to go back and plug in instead a negative 4, notice how it says domain error. And this means we have no real solutions. So you don't technically have to guess, but it's that negative that's going to be the problem for us. So you're just going to write no real solutions for that. Then here's a couple more examples. Notice how this time I have a C term, so I'm going to have to move that constant to the other side of my equal sign. So here I'm going to add 48 over. And now I'll have 3x squared is equal to 48. Now before I take the square root, I want to get rid of that 3 in the front because I don't want to square root of 3. So x squared will equal 48 divided by 3, which is 16. And now this becomes the problem that we just did here. Apply the square root symbol. Don't forget to apply to your answer plus and minus. And the square root, I'm just going to show you here on your calculator, square root of 16 is 4. Just don't forget it's really positive 4 and negative 4. And then again, solving for your quadratic, we need to add here our 3 to the other side. Here we have 2x squared is equal to 3. Isolate your square by dividing by 2. Now I'm going to write the decimal here. 3 divided by 2 is 1.5, and now I'm going to square root that decimal. Okay, so I'm going to take, instead of 16, I'm going to type in 1.5. You could also type in 3 divided by 2. We're going to get two answers, a positive 1.22 and a negative 1.22. And then here for our last one, I'm going to subtract 6 over. I have 4x squared then is equal to 4 minus 6, or negative 2. Isolate your x squared here by dividing by 4. I'm going to put a decimal here. You could leave it as negative 2 over 4 or simplify to a half. But if I square root a negative, notice you get an error. So we're going to write no real solutions. Okay, since my video is not super long yet, I'm going to do 3 more where we're just going to continue to isolate our x squared, and notice how we're going to have a couple operations on all of these. What we want to do is move your constant to the other side and isolate your x squared, and we started to do that here. So I want to show you these are pretty much the same, so we'll just do these 4 more that are very much like the 3 that we just did. So isolating my x squared here, I'm going to subtract 120 because I want to get the square part alone. Negative 30 minus 120 is negative 150, and I noticed there was a negative sign in front of that 6, so I got to keep that there. Now I'm going to divide by negative 6, and my x squared will be negative 150 divided by negative 6 is 25. And now if I apply my square root, I'm going to apply to my answer plus and minus. Well, I know the square root of 25 is 5, so I have answers of 5 and negative 5. Now again, we want to isolate our square term here. We want to get this term alone, so I'm going to add 12 to the other side. 108 plus 12 would be 120. Then divide by 15. And 120 divided by 15 is 8. And now let's apply our square root symbol. If you've been taught how to simplify radicals here, great. I just haven't taught my kids yet, so I'm just going to do the decimal form. So stay tuned for other videos that are going to come up on simplifying radicals. But I won't do that in this same video. So I'm going to use my decimals here. So plus and minus 2.8. Now this 8 is going to round that 2 up to be a 3 here. Now some teachers might be okay with you leaving it as plus minus. Some teachers might want you to write them both out, so just make sure you ask to see what's kind of expected of you. And now I'm going to keep going here because I got 2 more left. I want to isolate my square term, so I want to subtract 12. And then I have 4 over 5 x squared will now equal 5 minus 12, or negative 7. I'm going to get rid of the 5 by multiplying both sides by 5. And now I'm going to divide both sides by 4. Negative 35 divided by 4 is negative 8.75. And I already know if I'm going to take the square root of negative, I'm going to get no real solutions. Again, you can type that out on your calculator and you're going to see an error message. Something similar to that. And now for my last one here, I'm going to add 8 to the other side. And I have negative 5x squared then will equal 40. And if I divide both sides by negative 5, I get x squared is equal to -8. And again, if I take the square root of negative, I'm going to get no real solutions. So notice how even if I got rid of that 0.75, I'll delete that decimal part. Notice again, you get that domain error. Stay tuned, we're going to do some harder solving problems next where you have a group squared. They call that kind of a quantity squared, so stay tuned.